So in 30 to 60 years, we could see nations completely wiped off the map because of sea level rise.
Absolutely. They could be completely wiped off the map, and this has tremendous ramifications not only for the survival of this country, but also looking at where are these people going to go.
Diplomats from around the world have been meeting without success for over 20 years in an effort to hammer out a United Nations agreement on climate change. This year, they're meeting in Paris as 2015 is on track to be the hottest year ever recorded. Hotter temperatures and rising seas are already changing the environment. But what sort of impacts will they have on humans, plants, and animals? I met with Shyla Raghav to discuss the issue.
So nice to meet you.
She's a UN delegate for the Maldives, a nation under severe threat by rising sea levels. She explained some of the lesser-known ways that climate change is already having alarming impacts. You're part of the negotiating team for the Maldives, which is a low-lying state threatened with sea level rise. In what ways are low-lying nations like the Maldives threatened differently than, say, rich countries like the United States or European nations?
So low-lying atoll nations like the Maldives, and there's several of them in the Pacific as well, including Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, just a minor increase in sea level rise can have a more extreme impact and a more devastating impact in many of these places, particularly because many of these areas, the settlements as well, are on coastal zones. And so one-time single extreme events can have a bigger impact on these nations. And it's not really a matter of even just destruction from storms. It really is a matter of their survival. For many of these countries, they might be entirely submerged by water, anywhere from 30 to 60 years, looking at some of the projections that we're seeing.
Wow, so in 30 to 60 years, we could see nations completely wiped off the map because of sea level rise.
Absolutely, and this has tremendous ramifications and implications not only for the survival of this country, but also looking at where are these people going to go. There's going to be a tremendous amount of displacement, potentially migration or climate refugees that might have to be resolved or reconciled at the international level.
So you're talking about setting up mechanisms for transferring entire populations from these nations to resettle in other countries?
Potentially, yes. So many countries, as they are entering into these climate negotiations, are looking for some sort of remedy to this issue. They want some sort of assurance and a recognition that they are experiencing exceptional circumstances due to climate change, and that there really is the global community behind them and really in a concerted effort to address their particular circumstances.
How many people are we talking about? How many people potentially could be displaced permanently from their homes, their nations, because of rising sea levels?
The populations themselves of Pacific Islands and the Maldives, for example, are in the hundreds of thousands. Wow. But it really isn't just an issue of only small islands. There's also low-lying countries like Bangladesh, which is the most densely populated country in the world. And many of these areas might also experience inundation of sea level in terms of coastal erosion or coastal flooding that will render many places uninhabitable.
Can you give some examples of the way in which climate change is shifting the habitats of animals and plant species?
A really good example is tuna. So as climate change occurs, it warms the ocean, which alters the temperature of the ocean, but also the currents. And this also has implications for tuna migratory patterns. So in many places, tuna might be moving into deeper seas, which will require fishermen to obtain and acquire larger boats to enable them to fish. But also this means that fish are moving into different fishing territories, which also have implications for different countries and their fishing rights.
Which is alarming because that's not just climate change moving these fish species around, it's impacting economies, it's impacting livelihoods, and it sounds like it's impacting potentially the food supply.
Exactly, it's affecting food supply, but also the nutrition value of how communities in these countries are acquiring their protein and their livelihoods.
Are you hopeful that there's going to be an agreement, a sufficient agreement coming out of Paris?
I'm hopeful that there will be an agreement. I don't think it will be perfect. I think that it will really serve as a basis or a foundation for countries to collaborate together over the next few decades. I don't think that it's going to be a comprehensive or sufficient response to entirely halt global warming and really comprehensively allow us to adapt to its impacts. But I do think that we'll make tremendous amount of progress in understanding how we can begin to work together as a global community.